Hi, my name is Dan Sharp. I'm a landlord here in Pasadena and an advocate for Pasadena rent control.
Hi, my name is Maya Sharp, and I am also a landlord here in Pasadena, and I'm an advocate for the Pasadena for Rent Control campaign.
So tell us, Dan and Maya, how did you hear about the campaign, and tell us how you became active in the campaign?
Well, we've worked with many different housing justice organizations over the past few years through the community and through our church. So this campaign is something that a lot of our friends and other advocates have been working on.
So why do you think rent control is important to the faith community?
Most importantly, we are supposed to treat others as we would want to be treated. And to have a predictable and reasonable rent, I think, is exceedingly important to everyone. And if we can continue down that line, looking at, as a faith community, we should take care of the least of these. We should take care of people in our community that are vulnerable. And by having a fair and predictable rent, I think that is one way that we can do that. That's just kind of the fundamentals of how my faith or our faith coincides with how we engage with the people that rent from us. I was going to say our tenants, but I don't like the labels. It's more fun and more engaging to think of our friends and our neighbors as opposed to people that are a line item on a budget.
Being landlords, that's still a weird word for us to say.
What's your counter argument to landlords who say rent control will cause them to lose money and be over-regulated?
Having looked at the rent control ordinance and knowing the details of it, it's weird that that is essentially the way that we have treated our rental agreement with our tenants. It is not an overly hard burden to think that when you start with a rent that is fair, that over time, with reasonable increases, that rent is still fair in the future. It provides predictability for you as a landlord having long-term tenants. It provides predictability for the tenants to have a reasonable and predictable rent that they can plan for. And it continues to allow Pasadena to have a diverse community. And I think that's valuable for everyone who cares about our community. There may be some landlords here that are only about the bottom line, and I think that's a hard way to go through life. And I don't think that's ultimately a race to the bottom that doesn't really serve anyone.
So how many units do you rent out?
We have a single.
A unit. Single.
Yeah. So we're not large scale landlords in the slightest, but the people that we've rented to for over 10 years are good friends of ours and have become good friends. They didn't start out as good friends, and it's been a good opportunity to just be in a relationship with people. And like I said before, it's far from being a number. And I think if more people looked at it like that, more landlords look at it like that, there's ways that you can still make a reasonable amount of money, and you're not just trying to squeeze every last dime out of somebody who's just trying to live.
For me, I think about I know that I'll always have a place to live, and I don't have a concern about not having an affordable place. The consequences for me as a landlord, if I lose money, that's just a little bit of money, as opposed to like someone not being able to find a place to live. Those are much bigger consequences. So I think if we think of housing as a community, we think about our needs, but then we also think about the needs of the people that are renting from us, and also the needs of the community. Because if someone leaves because they can't pay the rent, that's a fracture to the whole community. We lose those people that are part of our families and part of our churches and part of our schools. So it's a much bigger stakes for people who are renting and maybe don't know what their future might be.
Can you relate situations of people you know who may have been forced to move out because they can't afford the rent or they're on the verge of that?
Well, I've seen our kids gone to the local elementary school, and we know a lot of families that have had to leave. And sometimes it can be really disruptive taking kids out of school in the middle of the year um, because of their housing situation. When people need to move because the rent is too high, then we lose. My kids would lose their friends from school and their teachers, um, and so we've seen that happen, and so we want people to be able to be rooted in the community and to stay for generations and have that richness in our community. So we have known families that have been affected in that way, and also families who are only able to stay in Pasadena because of low income housing programs. This is kind of a justice issue where we feel like our community should be diverse and it should have housing available to all income levels. So that's kind of some of the things that have guided our decisions on what we do with our rental and our work in the community and supporting a campaign like this, because we want people to we want Pasadena to be diverse in its housing and its people.
Yeah, and it's especially hard. We know a number of people that are kind of on the verge of not being able to stay here in Pasadena, and I guess I think there's obviously a limit to people should be able to live in a certain community, or maybe I want to live right by the beach and I can't quite afford that. And I think I can recognize that there are definitely limits there, but when you're living in a very modest place in a neighborhood in Pasadena, and then your rent increases at a rate that is so much higher than anybody's income is increasing, it's that the change is happening so rapidly that it's unreasonable to expect people to adapt to that so quickly.
What's your story? Describe why rent control is important to you.
We bought our rental property about over 10 years ago, and at that time we were looking for investment opportunities, but we were concerned about investing in something that we didn't want to invest in something that would hurt people or the earth. So it was very hard to find something. And then our neighbors, the house next door became available for sale, and we thought that could be an investment that could help with our college expenses for our two kids. And so we just have that one property in front of our house, and we've had the same tenants there since we bought the house.
When we first set our rent, our rental agreement has only changed minimally during that time, and our rent increases have gone up in a less than inflation and certainly way less than market rate expenses. And I believe what we've done is very consistent with what the current ordinance is. We're still doing fine. Our tenants are doing fine. Everybody feels like they've been treated fairly, and I feel like that that model does not make us feel overregulated in the slightest. As when this future rent control ordinance goes into place, I think there's going to be people that make it out to be much worse than it is.
But when we started renting the house, we really weren't sure what we were doing, so we didn't raise the rent for like years. And then we thought, well, maybe we should have some modest increases. So we actually talked with the people we were renting to, and kind of worked it out, a modest increase that would be predictable over the next few years. But at that point, we really committed to having our rent below fair market value, because we were looking at the rents in our neighborhood, and we were like, how can people pay this? I mean, we felt like ourselves, like we can barely pay these kinds of rents. So we did make a commitment at that time, this was years ago, that we would be below fair market value. We feel like that has allowed us to do maintenance, provide a good living area, or do the needed repairs. But we also know that we are also building equity in the house. So rent we don't need to make the rent as high as we can, because there are other ways that this is an investment for us. So we really try to balance what our costs are with the needs of our tenants, and that's worked out for us and for our tenants too.
It's one thing to be, selling a car and wanting to get value out of it. It's another thing when it's someone's home. It's where they live. When you're just trying to gouge somebody when it's just a regular home, in a normal neighborhood that's not fancy, I think that's when it becomes problematic for me to look at that and to try to treat it like a commodity where you're trying to get the most out of it. There's something there that doesn't seem right to me, doesn't seem moral. And I think the rent control ordinance would create that level of predictability and do that in a way that doesn't put too much regulation on a landlord and allows them to still make a decent amount of money on rent, but do that in a fair way.
We don't want to add to the rent burden in our community, so we're trying to keep our housing costs, or our renters' housing costs, more reasonable.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.